Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we get ready for one of these, the desk is it's a mess.
It's an absolute scatter plot of information, yeah.
Right. We've got a dozen articles from different papers, maybe a couple white papers, some academic stuff, clips from YouTube. We're trying to be detectives, really, piecing together a puzzle from, like, 10 different boxes just to give you a coherent picture.
It's an assembly job most of the time. We're building the narrative from the scraps that are out there.
Exactly. But today, today is different. Today, we aren't building the puzzle.
Yeah.
We are looking at a single, massive, honestly monolithic source that claims it has already solved it. And the picture it paints is, well, disturbing. It doesn't even begin to cover it.
Disturbing is the polite word. I was thinking something more along the lines of apocalyptic.
That's probably close. Or civilizational shift, maybe. We are analyzing a very specific broadcast from the year 2026. This is Candace Owens, episode 300, and the title is Bail So Hard, the Epstein Files. Now look, whatever you think of her as a commentator, love or hate her, doesn't matter. The document she presents here is just unbelievably dense.
It's over 2 hours of just rapid-fire connections. She's linking history, psychology, intelligence agencies, theology. It's a lot.
And that's the key, isn't it? This is not just a political rant. It's not another, here's why the other party is terrible.
Yeah.
It's a unified theory of everything.
It is. She's arguing that all these things we normally keep in totally separate boxes in our minds, Sigmund Freud's psychology over here, Jeffrey Epstein's blackmail operation over there, the death of Charlie Kirk, ancient Canaanite religion. She's arguing they're actually all the same thing.
That is a very heavy lift.
Yeah.
I mean, usually if you try to connect Sigmund Freud to Jeffrey Epstein in a sentence, you sound like you've been staring at a corkboard with red string for way too long.
It's an incredibly heavy lift. But our mission today, and we need to be really clear about this, is to strip away the rhetoric. We're going to ignore the shouting, ignore the politics of it, and just look at the structural argument she is making.
Right.
We are not here to say this is true or this is false. We are here to say this is the blueprint of the worldview she is describing. Because if even, let's say, 10% of the connections she makes in the source material are valid, it completely changes how you view the last 100 years of history.
And the stakes in this 2026 timeline she's describing are just incredibly high. She is talking about the murder, not the death, she is very specific, the murder of a major political figure in Charlie Kirk.
A huge figure.
She's talking about the complete compromise of a vice president in J.D. Vance. She's talking about the total infiltration of global intelligence agencies. So I guess we should just take a deep breath and start at the beginning, which, surprisingly, is not Jeffrey Epstein.
No. To understand the end of the story, you have to understand the beginning. And in this source material, the beginning is Vienna, late 19th century. We have to talk about Sigmund Freud.
This is the first, I guess, curveball for me. I was expecting a deep dive right into flight logs, bank transfers, that kind of thing. But no, she starts with psychoanalysis. Why? Why start there?
Because the entire case she's building is about gaslighting on a civilizational scale. And if you want to control an entire population, you first have to control how they think about their own minds. Her argument leans really heavily on a book. It's titled Sigmund Freud and the Jewish Mystical Tradition.
Okay.
And she posits that Freud wasn't just a scientist, observing the mind in some kind of vacuum. She claims he was an initiate into a specific form of what she calls occult mysticism.
She's very, very specific about the timing on this, too. She makes point of saying he waited until he was exactly 36 years old.
Right. And in many occult traditions, numbers are everything. 36 is a significant number. The source argues that this initiation was the absolute pivot point of his entire life and career. Before this initiation, Freud is actually presented in the source almost as a tragic hero.
A truth teller.
A truth teller, exactly. He's working in the morgues of Vienna.
Let's just pause on that image for a second.
Yeah.
Because this is not the Freud we all picture, right?
Yeah.
Guy in the armchair, smoking a cigar, listening to neurotic housewives.
No, not at all. This is young Freud. He's a medical doctor. He's examining bodies, and specifically, he is examining the bodies of children, dead children, and at the same time, he is listening to his living patients. People who are coming to him with stories that would just make your skin crawl.
What kind of stories?
Horrific abuse, ritual abuse, incest, torture, things that polite society in Vienna did not want to acknowledge even existed.
And his initial theory, his first big idea, was the seduction theory, right? I remember this vaguely from like a Psych 101 class, but it's always glossed over so quickly.
It is always glossed over, but here it is absolutely central to the argument. His initial conclusion, based on the physical evidence from the morgue and the testimony from his patients, was incredibly simple. They are telling the truth.
He believed the victims?
He believed them. He was convinced that there was a pervasive underground network of horrific abuse happening right under the surface of respectable Viennese society.
So what did he do with this information?
He compiled all this data, he put together his findings, and he went to the Psychological Society in Vienna, Owens vividly calls the Perverted Psychology Club, and he laid it all out. He said, "Gentlemen, we have a crisis. There is a massive underground network of abuse happening in our city. Fathers are abusing daughters. There's ritualistic violence. It's everywhere."
And I'm guessing the response was not, "Thank you, Dr. Freud, here's a medal."
They crushed him, absolutely crushed him. They ostracized him. They essentially told him, if you publish this, your career is over. You are finished. You cannot implicate these powerful families. You cannot suggest that the pillars of our society are, in fact, monsters.
So according to the source, this is the fork in the road. This is the moment of truth for Freud. He has a choice: stand by the truth and be completely destroyed by the establishment, or invent a new truth.
And that, according to Candace Owens, is the moment modern psychoanalysis is born. After his initiation at age 36, he does a complete 180, a total reversal. He comes back to the same society and says, actually, you know what? I was wrong. These patients weren't actually abused.
Wait, what?
They are fantasizing about being abused. It's because of something I'm calling the Oedipus complex. They secretly wanted it. It's all just wish fulfillment.
That is a profoundly dark reframing of the entire field of psychology. She's essentially arguing that the discipline was invented to convince victims that their trauma is imaginary.
It is the ultimate gaslight. It's the intellectual framework for it's all in your head.
Right. You're just projecting.
It shifts all of the blame from the perpetrator directly onto the victim's own imagination. But she doesn't just, rely on theory or speculation here. This is where she pulls out a document, a primary source. It's a letter from Freud to his very close friend Wilhelm Flies, or Fliess, as it shows up in the transcript.
I have the text of that letter right here. It is. It's visceral. I'm going to read a short segment of it because the specific imagery is really important for where this argument goes later. It's not easy to listen to, just a warning. Freud writes, and this is a quote, "Imagine I obtained a scene about the circumcision of a girl, the cutting of a piece of her labia, sucking up the blood, following which the child was given a piece of the skin to eat."
It's stomach-turning. It's unbelievably graphic. But pay very close attention to how he frames it, how he characterizes it immediately after describing that horror.
He writes, "I dream, therefore, of a primeval devil religion whose rites are carried on secretly."
Primeval devil religion.
That phrase.
Owens latches onto that phrase like a bulldog. Her argument is, Freud isn't dreaming. He's not speculating. He's describing what he actually saw in the morgues. He's describing what his patients told him. He's describing what he knows is happening in the shadows of Vienna. He even calls them witches' Sabbaths in the letter.
So when Owens titles her deep dive, "Ball So Hard," she's drawing a direct, uninterrupted line from ancient history to that letter. She's saying that the devil religion Freud wrote about, these blood rituals, the consumption of flesh, is the very same thing she's investigating in the Epstein files in 2026.
Correct. She is establishing what she believes is a continuity of evil, from the ancient Canaanites to Victorian Vienna to modern-day New York and a private island in the Caribbean. She is telling the listener, this did not start with Jeffrey Epstein. This has been the operating system of a certain global elite for centuries.
And then she broadens the scope even further, bringing in an organization called B'nai B'rith.
Yes, this is where the historical revisionism gets really, really intense. She claims Freud was a member of this lodge, B'nai B'rith.
Is that part true?
That part is historically accurate, yes. Freud was a member of the Vienna B'nai B'rith Lodge. It was a major part of his social and intellectual life. But Owens frames the organization itself not as a Jewish charitable group, but as a geopolitical tool. She calls it a hub for what she terms Jewish supremacists. And she says they specialize in one thing above all else, creating false dialectics.
Okay, let's define that term for the listener, false dialectic. It sounds like something out of a philosophy seminar.
It does, but it's actually a pretty simple control mechanism. Think of it like a stage play. If you want to control a population, you don't just rule over them directly with an iron fist, because that just breeds rebellion.
Right, people will eventually fight back.
Instead, you create two opposing sides that seem to be in mortal combat. North versus South, left versus right, Republican versus Democrat. You carefully define the boundaries of the conflict, you set the terms of the debate, and then, and this is the most important part, You secretly fund and control both sides.
So you're managing the conflict itself. No matter who wins the battle on the ground, you win the war because you own the entire battlefield.
You own the whole theater, exactly. And she applies this theory directly to the American Civil War. She alleges that this group, operating out of Europe and New York, was manipulating the conflict between the Union and the Confederacy. As evidence, she cites General Ulysses S. Grant's infamous General Order Number 11.
Which is where he expelled all Jews from his military district. Historians usually frame that as, a really ugly moment of prejudice from Grant, a stain on his record.
And Owens completely flips that interpretation on its head. She argues Grant wasn't just being a bigot. He was a general in the middle of a war spotting an intelligence operation. He saw that certain traders were playing both sides, selling supplies to the Union and the Confederacy, prolonging the war for immense profit, and he tried to cut it off at the source.
So she frames Grant as someone who saw the strings of the puppet show.
Precisely. She also ties the same network to the creation of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League.
How does she make that connection?
She argues the ADL was born out of B'nai B'rith for a very specific purpose: to cover up a crime. Specifically, the murder of a young girl named Mary Fagan. Her thesis is that these organizations, the ADL, the psychological associations, you name it, they essentially function as cleanup crews.
What do you mean by cleanup crews?
They exist to manage the narrative. The moment anyone gets too close to the truth of the rituals or the blackmail or the false dialectic, the cleanup crew rushes in and screams racism or anti-Semitism or conspiracy theory to shut down the inquiry. It's a defense mechanism.
Okay, so if we're going to summarize this whole first section, the foundation of her entire 2-hour argument is this. We are all living in a world that is defined by a massive psychological cover-up, which was started by Freud, and a political puppet show, the false dialectics, which is orchestrated by a group that secretly practices a primeval pagan religion.
And that this is critical views the rest of humanity as cattle. That's the Goyim concept she introduces repeatedly. And that mindset, this idea that other humans are just livestock, that is the perfect bridge into the next section of her argument.
Yeah.
The Epstein files.
Right, because in this narrative she's building, Jeffrey Epstein isn't some strange anomaly. He's not just one uniquely bad apple.
He is the modern implementation of the exact system that Freud was allegedly paid to cover up.
Exactly. And this is where we move from, interpreting 19th century history to analyzing what she claims are smoking gun documents from the present day. We are leaving Vienna and entering the cold, hard reality of the 2026 file dump.
And the centerpiece of this second act is an email that Owens calls the permission to kill email.
Let's talk about this. This is a major piece of her evidence.
It's huge for her argument. So we are looking at an email that was released in the Epstein file dump. It was originally redacted by the Department of Justice, just blacked out. But Owens claims to be working off an unredacted version that was found by independent researchers.
And what does it say?
The sender is communicating with someone about an individual who has apparently lied or betrayed them in some way. And the key phrase is just chillingly simple. It's 6 words.
I give you permission to kill him.
Just like that. Not neutralize him, not take care of the problem, not some kind of corporate euphemism.
No, it's permission to kill. It sounds so bureaucratic, so administrative, like filling out a form.
That's what's so terrifying about it. It implies a formal process. And the names associated with this correspondence, according to the source, are a Susan Hamlin and a mysterious woman referred to only as Olga.
Okay, who is Susan Hamlin? Why is she important?
Susan Hamlin is a very significant figure in this web, according to Owens. She identifies her publicly as a financial advisor, but more importantly, she was the founder of an adoption agency. It was called Kids to Families.
An adoption agency. I mean, given the context of Jeffrey Epstein, that immediately puts a knot in my stomach.
It should. It's horrifying. And Owens connects Hamlin directly to a lawsuit where she was accused of procuring a 16-year-old girl for Epstein. The allegation in that lawsuit was that when the girl tried to back out, Hamlin threatened her.
What kind of threat?
Not that she'd sue her. She allegedly told this teenager that Jeffrey Epstein had the power to have her entire family killed.
So let me just get this straight. You have a woman who is running an adoption agency, which gives her access to vulnerable, undocumented, or orphan children, who is also allegedly procuring girls for a trafficking ring, and who now appears in an email chain discussing authorizations for murder.
You see how the pieces start to lock together in her narrative. It moves the entire Epstein story beyond just sex trafficking. This is an organized murdering. Owens asks the obvious question. Who has the authority to grant permission to kill someone in an email that the DOJ then feels the need to redact?
That's not a private citizen. That's not a corporation.
That's state power.
Yeah.
That is a license to kill. That's an intelligence operation.
And speaking of power, this is where she drops the biggest name in global finance, the Rothschilds.
This is where she claims the conspiracy goes all the way to the very top of the pyramid. She reads from another document, one where Epstein allegedly states explicitly and for the record that he works for the Rothschilds.
Not with them. He works for them, like an employee.
Correct, as an operative. And she details a specific transaction she found in the files, a payment of $25 million from the Rothschild family to Jeffrey Epstein.
For what?
The payment was for certain algorithms.
Algorithms. That's incredibly vague. What does she think that actually means?
In this context, she argues it's about control. It's about power. She plays a clip from another source discussing how these vast fortunes are made not by investing, but by manipulating markets, knowing when a crash is coming because you are the one who's going to cause the crash. But she also links it directly to geopolitics.
Oh, so.
There's a mention in the files of overthrowing the Ukrainian government to create, quote, great opportunities. The idea is that these algorithms aren't just for stocks, they're for destabilizing entire countries.
So Epstein, in this view, is basically a geopolitical fix-it man, a contractor. You need a market crash, you need a government overthrown, you need a child trafficked for blackmail. It's all part of the same business model for him.
It's multi-domain warfare, waged from the shadows. And this brings us right to the big intelligence debate that was apparently raging in 2026. There was this massive public feud between Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro about Epstein's specific intelligence allegiance.
Right, I remember this. Tucker was arguing that Epstein was an asset for Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency.
And Ben Shapiro came out swinging against that. His rebuttal was that Tucker's claim was impossible because, according to him, Mossad hasn't been active on U.S. soil since the 1980s.
What was Omens' take on that defense?
She just tears Shapiro apart over this. She calls his defense gaslighting. She literally plays the clip of Shapiro citing a former Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, who, of course, denies any involvement. And Owens' on-air reaction is just visceral laughter.
She doesn't buy it at all.
She says, "Are you kidding me?" She essentially argues that believing a major foreign intelligence agency hasn't been active in the United States for 40 years is like believing the sky isn't blue. It's an insult to your intelligence.
So she is firmly in the camp that this was an Israeli intelligence operation.
Yes, but she nuances it. She's careful.
Yeah.
She calls it a Jewish supremacist operation, but she defines that term very specifically through quotes from the Epstein files themselves. She quotes Epstein allegedly saying, "If you want to hire the best people, you have to hire only Jews," which implies a clear belief in genetic superiority.
And there was another example she used, right?
A very disturbing one. She mentions a BlackRock executive's son, a man named Joshua Finkelstein, who allegedly pressured his non-Jewish partner into having an abortion. And the reason he gave, according to the source, was that he viewed non-Jews as not human.
Not human. There it is again. We're right back to the cattle concept from the first section.
It's the connective tissue of the entire theory, because if you genuinely believe that the rest of humanity is a different, lower species, then trafficking them, experimenting on them like Freud's cases, or killing them like the email suggests, it isn't a moral issue for you anymore.
It's just livestock management.
It completely removes the moral inhibitor. And she argues that this web, this operation, is so vast that it traps everyone, including the people that many on the right think are the good guys. And this leads us directly into the political fallout section, specifically the fallout for J.D. Vance and his patron, Peter Thiel.
This is where the deep dive gets very, very messy for the political right in the year 2026. The source goes into the release of Peter Thiel's personal emails as part of the Epstein file dump.
Right. And you have to remember, Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir, a major tech billionaire, he had always aggressively downplayed his relationship with Epstein. He was the cool billionaire, the outsider.
His story was that they met a few times to talk about, what was it, crypto and taxes?
Yeah, math stuff, just a couple of nerds hanging out. But Owens says the emails tell a completely different story. Frequent meetings, dinners, introducing Epstein to his circle. She says they were, quote, together all throughout New York. She implies it was a deep personal friendship.
So he lied. But why does she use the phrase that he was thrown under the bus? What does she mean by that?
She believes the release of these specific emails about Thiel was a calculated move by the people who control the flow of information. He was deliberately exposed, maybe to protect others who were even more deeply involved, or perhaps to punish Thiel for something. But the real target, or at least the most significant collateral damage, is J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance, who, in this 2026 timeline, is the vice president, or at least a major figure in the administration.
And Peter Thiel is the architect of J.D. Vance's entire political career. Thiel funded the publication of Hillbilly Elegy. He poured money into the Senate run. Owens is making a classic fruit of the poisonous tree argument here.
Meaning, if the money source Thiel is compromised and tied to the Epstein intelligence web,
then the politician who was created by that money, Vance, is therefore owned and controlled by that same web.
it completely undermines the entire populist America First narrative. If the money behind the movement is this dirty, then the movement itself is dirty.
It becomes controlled opposition. It's another false dialectic. And she suggests this is why the populist movement might often feel so ineffective. Because at the highest levels, it's being managed by the very people it claims to be fighting.
And then she makes one last crucial link here, involving Palantir, Thiel's company.
Palantir is, as we know, deeply embedded with the U.S. military and intelligence community. But she mentions one base in particular, Fort Huachuca.
Fort Huachuca, Arizona. I've heard that name before. That's Army intelligence, right?
It is the headquarters of the United States Army Intelligence Center. It is literally where the spies are trained. And Owens uses this specific location, this military connection, as a bridge to the most emotional and, frankly, the most shocking part of her entire broadcast.
The death of Charlie Kirk.
The murder. She's absolutely unequivocal about it. She refuses to use the word death. In her telling, it was an assassination, plain and simple.
All right, let's get into this part, because this section of the broadcast feels like a forensic investigation. She breaks down the last 48 hours of Charlie Kirk's life, September 8th, 9th, and 10th. Let's walk through this timeline because the details she presents are incredibly specific.
It all starts with a political pivot, a betrayal in the eyes of his donors. On September 8th, or it might have been the 9th, she notes there's a dispute about the exact timestamp of the message. Charlie Kirk sends a text message, and in it he says, "I'm abandoning the pro-Israel cause."
Wow. I mean, for him, that is a massive shift. Turning Point USA was one of the staunchest institutional allies of that lobby. That's a complete 180-degree turn.
She calls it a break in the programming. And she argues very starkly that this text message was his death warrant. The moment he sent that, the clock started ticking.
So we move to the next day, September 9th, the day before he dies. What's the atmosphere like inside his organization?
Absolute chaos. Just total chaos. He's just gotten back from a trip to Korea. He's severely jet-lagged, and his phone is blowing up. Donors are pulling out. She names one specifically, Bob Shillman, a major, major donor. He pulls all of his funding.
So the financial pressure is immediate.
Immediate and immense. The internal Turning Point USA chats are exploding. She says Charlie is texting other people, saying things like, "I want Candace back," implying that he realizes he's made a mistake, that he's surrounded by enemies and he needs his old ally back. He can feel the walls closing in on him.
And then comes this phone call, the panic call, she calls it.
Yeah. Late at night on September 9th, a Zoom call is hastily arranged. On the call are Charlie, Josh Hammer, and a rabbi who is physically based in Israel. Now, the official story that was later given by Josh Hammer was that Charlie asked for this call because he wanted debate advice.
Debate advice.
Yes, advice on how to handle Jewish-Christian relations during campus debates.
And Owens doesn't buy that for a second.
She openly mocks it. She says, "Charlie Kirk is a professional debater. He's been doing this for a decade. He just got off a 14-hour flight from Korea. He's exhausted. And you're telling me he urgently needs basic talking points from a rabbi in Israel at midnight."
She thinks it was something else entirely.
She implies this wasn't a prep session. It was a struggle session. It was a threat. It was a you get back in line right now or else conversation.
And what happens immediately after this call? Charlie does something very strange. He has dinner with his wife, Erica, and a priest.
To pray over a curse.
A curse. I'm sorry, a curse.
That is the official story. He allegedly told this priest that a recent article in the publication Jezebel had placed a witch's curse on him, and he wanted it prayed away.
That seems odd.
Owens finds it completely absurd. She argues Charlie Kirk had much thicker skin than that. He dealt with negative press every single day. She believes he called the priest because he felt a tangible physical threat to his life. He was spiritually and physically terrified. He wasn't worried about a blog post. He was worried he was about to be killed.
And then comes the text message. the one that Owens treats as the absolute smoking gun of the entire case.
The text sent to two of his confidants, Dan Flood and Andrew Colvett. It's 5 simple words. They're going to kill me.
The official explanation that came out later was that they referred to trans activists or some other left-wing extremists who had been threatening him.
Owens rejects that out of hand. She says context is everything. In the 24 hours leading up to that text, who was threatening his funding? Who was he on a midnight panic call with? Who was he sending texts about abandoning? It wasn't trannies, she says. It was the Israel lobby. She argues that they clearly and obviously referred to his own donors and their handlers.
This is where the story gets even darker, because this leads to the most uncomfortable part of the entire episode. She turns her investigative lens directly on the widow, on Erica Kirk.
She flat out accuses Erica of being part of the cover-up. She goes through and lists what she calls the lies. First, when asked about the "they're gonna kill me" text, Erica publicly denied it existed, said it never happened.
But the recipients still had it.
Exactly. So when she was pressed on it, she changed her story. She then claimed it was a telegram message that had been set to auto-delete.
But Owens' source had the receipts, so to speak.
Yeah, it was an iMessage, a standard green bubble text. It didn't delete, it was right there on the phone. And Owens asked the question, why lie about the medium? Why lie about the platform? Unless you were actively trying to make the evidence disappear, why change your story?
Then there's the issue of the alibi for the night of the shooting itself.
The Rock. This is a huge point of contention. There's a witness, a friend named Frank Turek, who claims he was walking with Charlie around 8 p.m. that night. But a neighbor in the building, a neutral witness with no skin in the game, claims she saw Charlie walking with a tall, unidentified person she had never seen before in her life. The stories directly conflict. The timeline is a total mess.
And where was Erica during all this? What was her alibi?
And that's the missing piece of the puzzle for Owens. Erica's alibi was that she was at a doctor's office or in the parking lot, screaming hysterically. But Owens claims she cannot find a single witness to place Erica at that location during the critical window when the shot was fired. In a residential building where everyone knows everyone, nobody saw her.
The implication, then, is that she was either somehow involved, or at the very least she knows who was and is protecting them.
And the motive for her silence. As always in this narrative, money. Owens introduces a mysterious figure into the story at this point. A man named Pierre.
Just Pierre, no last name.
Just Pierre. And shortly after Charlie's death, a $1 billion check, or at least a massive 9-figure influx of new funding, allegedly flows into Turning Point USA from this Pierre character.
It sounds like a classic bust out, like in the mob. You kill the leader who is going rogue, you install a new compliant management, you pay everyone off with a massive check to ensure their silence, and the organization goes right back to being a useful tool.
Another pawn in the false dialectic. That is exactly the picture she taints. She calls it a hostile takeover of the American right sealed with blood. She has this line where she calls them snakes who slide right up and talk in your ear.
It is a lot to process. It turns what people see as political commentary into something out of a mafia movie. But she doesn't stop there, does she? She zooms the camera out one last time. She argues this control grid isn't just about politics, it's about culture. Specifically, the music industry.
The P. Diddy and Jay-Z connection. So in 2026, the Diddy scandals are apparently well known, but she drags Jay-Z right into the center of the spotlight. She goes back to the Epstein emails, and she cites a document that places Jay-Z at a scene with Harvey Weinstein where they allegedly witnessed an assault together.
But she goes further than that. She calls them Fed assets. What does that mean in this context?
She argues that the intelligence agencies use major rappers to degrade the culture, to promote nihilism, violence, hypermaterialism. They allow them to run drugs, traffic women, and commit other crimes as long as they push the right message in their music. The debasement of society, she calls it.
It's a trade-off.
A simple trade. You corrupt the youth for us, and we will keep you out of prison.
And she mentions the rapper Nicki Minaj in this section as well.
She holds up Nicki Minaj as a whistleblower. Minaj had posted a series of tweets about artists participating in satanic rituals and blood sacrifices to get ahead in the industry. And Owens takes those tweets absolutely literally. She says, look, they are telling you what's going on. To get to the top of that pyramid, you have to join the club. You have to participate in the primeval devil religion.
And that brings us completely full circle. We're right back to the theology, back to the synagogue of Satan.
She uses that specific biblical term. Now, she is very, very careful, throughout this section to distinguish what she's talking about from mainstream Torah-observant Judaism. She says she is talking about a very specific heretical sect, Frankism.
Okay, we need to explain Frankism.
Yeah.
Because a lot of listeners probably have no idea who Jacob Frank was.
Jacob Frank was a very strange and controversial 18th century mystic who claimed to be the Messiah, but his theology was essentially the inverse of traditional religion. He preached a doctrine of redemption through sin.
Which means to become holy, you have to break every single law.
Every single one. To save the world, he taught, you must descend into the abyss, you must commit evil, you must break every taboo, eat forbidden foods, engage in orgies and sexual perversion, worship false gods. He argued that the divine law itself was the thing holding humanity back, and it had to be destroyed through transgression.
And Omens is arguing that this bizarre, obscure 18th century cult didn't just die out.
She claims it just went underground. It infiltrated Freemasonry, it infiltrated the Vatican, it infiltrated mainstream Judaism, and today it provides the perfect cloak for the global elite. They can pretend to be Jews or Christians or Muslims or atheists in public, but in private they are Frankists. They are practicing the primeval devil religion of child sacrifice and ritual abuse in order to gain power.
She even gets into the symbolism. The Star of David.
She makes the claim that it's not actually the Star of David. She says it's the Star of Remphan, an ancient symbol of the god Saturn, or Baal. She points out that it was on the flag of Morocco, which she calls a hub of modern occultism, long before it became the symbol for the State of Israel.
She connects it to Aleister Crowley, too.
Right. She notes that Aleister Crowley, the famous occultist, used the hexagram in his magic rituals specifically to summon demons. It's all part of her argument that the language of symbolism has been inverted.
So, in her worldview, the entire symbolic language of the modern world is a lie.
It's an inversion. Everything is upside down. The people who claim to be holy are the most sinful. The good guys are the bad guys. The truth that Freud gave us is actually a lie. The leaders we vote for are just puppets.
So after 2 hours of this, where does this leave the listener? We've gone from Freud in Vienna to Epstein's Island to the murder of Charlie Kirk to the Star of Remphan. It is a unified theory of everything evil.
It's a theory of total warfare. She is looking at the audience and telling them, you are not in a political debate, you are in a spiritual war. The person you're arguing with on Twitter isn't the enemy. The enemy is the person who created the platform to make you argue.
And she ends with a challenge, right?
Yeah.
About the future, about 2028.
She does. She asks a very provocative question. She says, if the money, the Rothschilds, the mysterious Pierres, controls both sides of the aisle, then what difference does it make who runs for president? If the false dialectic is real, then isn't the entire election just another episode of the puppet show?
So her solution, it seems, is to disengage from the show entirely, to stop looking at the puppets and start looking at the strings.
Read the files. That's her final mantra. Don't listen to Ben Shapiro. Don't listen to the New York Times. She even says, don't just listen to her without verifying. Go to the source documents yourself. Look at the permission to kill. Email with your own eyes. Read the Freud letters.
Because once you see the pattern she's outlining, you can't unsee it.
That's the entire goal, to break the spell of the false dialectic, to show you the architecture of the prison.
Well, that is certainly a deep dive. We have just unpacked a narrative that fundamentally rewrites the history of the last 150 years. And whether you accept her conclusions or not, the internal logic of the argument, from the psychology of the abuser to the geopolitics of the abuse, is, you have to admit, terrifyingly consistent.
It provides an answer to the great question, why is the world the way it is? The answer it provides is profoundly dark, but for a lot of people listening, it might be the only answer that makes sense of the chaos they see around them.
We'll leave you with that thought. The files are out there, the narrative is out there, the rest is up to you. Thanks for listening.
Stay curious and stay vigilant.